Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham saranam gacchami, Dhammam saranam gacchami, Sangham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam saranam gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham saranam gacchami. This completes the one to the three refuges. Panyatipada Viramini Sikapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from harming or destroying living beings. Adina dana Viramini Sikapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu michachara Viramini Sikapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musa vada Viramini Sikapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from wrong speech. Sura Mareya Maja Padatana Viramini Sikapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from intoxicants that cause carelessness. I undertake the precept to refrain from sources of livelihood that bring harm to other beings. I undertake the precept to refrain from acting out of ill will or taking satisfaction in the misfortune of others. I undertake the precept to be open-hearted and generous in all my relationships with others. I undertake the precept to act for loving kindness and compassion in all my relationships with others. I undertake the precept to live with mindfulness and follow the Eightfold Path through daily study, meditation, and reflection. With these 10 precepts, virtue becomes the vehicle for a happy existence. Through virtue, good fortune is attained. Virtue is the vehicle for liberation. Let us purify our virtue. This completes the 10 precepts. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings be free from ill will. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings make themselves truly happy. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, any questions to start off with? Yes?
I want to ask about meditation, technique. this afternoon doing my sittings, I got to the point where I feel very still, very calm, and the body doesn't feel solid. It doesn't have that solid feel to it. And the breath is very light.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost as if I don't need to breathe,
Mm-hmm.
but I know I'm still breathing because there's like a tiny sensation, so I know that there's still breathing going on.
Mm-hmm.
But so I started to kind of see if everywhere else in my body has that pleasantness.
Mm-hmm.
And then I noticed that the only place that has numbness or pain is in the legs.
Mm-hmm.
But previously, when I moved my attention to the pain,
Mm-hmm.
then the pain will amplify.
Mm-hmm.
This time it didn't amplify.
Mm-hmm.
But so I just look at it, but it's still there. It doesn't disappear. And I just thought, well, maybe I could just stay there and see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also sense that there's not like a rejection from the mind, except there's like a little reluctance there that's reluctant to stay there for a long time. And then when I come out of it, then I feel like, okay, then I feel the solid body again. So next time when that happens, what should I...
Okay, next time, well, first of all, you discovered that there was some numbness in your legs, and then you stayed there with it. And the next time, just ignore that. If you were looking to see whether there was pleasure in your body somewhere, pleasant feeling, you should have continued. Next time, just continue with that. Yeah, and see if you can find the pleasant feeling, and then take that as the object. The time to take pain as an object is when it is so strong that you're not able to ignore it. Okay? Yeah. So.
But I have to still double check and make sure I don't slip into dullness even when I stay with pleasant.
Yes, you probably won't have the problem if the meditative state that you were in at the time you decided to do that. The nature of it is such that if you go to that, if you discover a pleasantness and you take that as the object, it would probably be just the opposite that happens. Well, it's possible that you might focus on the pleasantness and it just disappears, in which case you just go back to what you were doing for another maybe 5-10 minutes and then try again. But more likely what is going to happen, or I shouldn't say more likely because it's unpredictable, but the other alternative to what may happen is that when you meditate on that sensation, it will expand, and I don't mean to expand spatially so much as that it will fill your awareness, and when it does, your awareness will become very, very clear as a part of it. So you're unlikely to have dullness be a problem. If you happen to become aware of dullness, then go back to the nose and just pick up where you were before.
Because the breath is so fine, I feel like even there's like mama, even when I try to inhale, like just a little bit deeper, I feel like I don't need it. Mm-hmm. It's like, where did I read it? It's kind of like somewhere I read that if a jar of water is full and you keep pouring water in it, and then it just overfill because it doesn't need any more.
Right.
So, so I just. But then, how do I know that? I mean, should I still kind of check on my breath, even though that it's very, very fine?
No, just trust it's gonna, it's gonna be there. It's gonna be all right. You don't need to worry about it. One thing, when your breath is really fine like that, every now and then you'll find that a deep breath comes, So just let your body take care of itself. When the time comes that it needs a deeper breath, it will just take one. So. And when that happens, don't be surprised and don't let it distract you from from the practice that you're doing. Just let the body do it. So, that's one thing your body knows how to do, is to breathe. Yeah. And it knows how to breathe just the right amount for what you need when you need it. So
I wonder if there's intention involved, because earlier in the meditation, when our awareness is not sharpened, we have very strong breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And after our mind calms down, the breathing naturally slows down. So I wonder if there's an intention involved, because since the mind can observe the breath so well, we don't really need to breathe so deeply to have the sensations. So
you're wondering if there is some sort of intention causing you to breathe more strongly before that?
Is there very, very simple intention that we're asking ourselves? That's very, very, very simple.
Well, if you think about it, isn't the way your breath is earlier more the way it is when you're not meditating anyway? Isn't the way when you earlier on in the meditation, before it becomes very fine and subtle, don't you think it's actually at that time it's more the way it is all the rest of the time when you're not meditating?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. So
okay.
it's not being exaggerated even by any subtle intention.
I see.
It's just the way it starts out, more of a normal breathing, and as you go along it becomes finer and finer. So that's a sign of concentration or a result of concentration. It's just what happens, that your breathing becomes more subtle.
I see.
Yes?
Something that's been causing a lot of agitation for me is since the discussion we had earlier, my goal in this practice is to be, a arahat householder, right? And what we were talking about earlier, there seemed to be this sort of extremism in the way people were talking about, basically alienating yourself from your friends and your family and the people that are closest to you, if those people don't fit the requirements of being, good Dharma friends. And to me, that really caused a lot of aversion to arise, I guess, but because that seems to contradict the notion that this craving for, like you've said several times, this craving for setting up the world in such a way that it sort of fits what we want it to be. That sounds exactly like this idea that, if people don't fit your notions of what a good Buddhist is or what your values are, you should just eliminate them from your life, including possibly, the closest people to you, like your spouse or your kids or your parents. So I just wanted to, it seems to me that it seemed to go to that extreme earlier, and it sort of bothered me.
I think it's the way that you heard it, and so let me just sort of summarize it. And okay, the idea is not that you, as a Buddhist practitioner, are going to reject anyone, socially and otherwise. The closest it comes, and remember the question that originally started this, if you are a person who doesn't have a lot of inner strength, and you find yourself in the company of people who are strongly trying to persuade you to engage in unwholesome behaviors, then in that case, you're best to not to associate with those people, because they make you vulnerable through your own desire to be accepted and liked. To the degree that you can resist that, then you don't need to separate yourself from those people, but rather to the degree that you can resist their attempts to coerce your behavior, you can instead practice skillful means, which we can define skillful means as to try to help another person come from an unwholesome to a more wholesome state of mind. Right? But in the choice where you feel like you are in danger of having your own virtue compromised, you're better to remove yourself from the company of those people. In the rest of what we were talking about is not that you would alienate yourself from your previous friends and your family, but as you become less interested in things like idle talk, gossip, television shows, movies, things like that, that they are going to find you less exciting and interesting to be around. And they may, in fact, complain about that somewhat. But at the same time, if you become very self-centered and withdrawn, perhaps they will totally lose interest and abandon you, and you will have alienated yourself. But that doesn't need to be the case, because you can still come from a place of loving kindness and compassion and caring for these people. If they are your friends, you care for them. And you can openly be who and what you are and share what is important to you without forcing it on them. And it becomes their choice. But unfortunately, the most likely thing that's going to happen is that you are going to cease to have as much contact with some of those people, not because you choose to do that, but because they no longer find that they have their worldly concerns in common with you in the same way that they did before. And likewise with your family and your spouse. There is often going to be, and it so much depends on all of the people involved, but there is often going to be some kind of reaction that, well, you've changed. And it may take the form of, you're not as much fun as you used to be. Probably the best thing to do is to come, first of all, out of a place of love and compassion, and take the extra step to the degree that you can to find a common ground that doesn't compromise your priorities. If you're primarily interested in the Dharma and becoming an arhat and practice and talking about Buddhism with people that care about that, it may mean that you have less time available for other kinds of activities, but still, coming from a place of being a loving, caring person, you can reach out to those who you care about and that care about you, and to try to sustain that place. Alienation should only happen if it seems somehow it happens by itself and it's unavoidable, and you've done what you can to keep it from happening.
May I share a little bit with you? There's some of my friends, they really want to hang out with me. I actually, in the end, I take all of them to my Dharma class. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes if some very good teacher, like Culadasa, come to our area, if some good Dharma teacher teaching wisdom, I actually called all of them, say, hey, come over, you will learn something. Mm-hmm. I kind of, and actually, in fact, I did convert some of my friends become Buddhists. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they are happy because they are learning wisdom. Mm-hmm. And the family part, because I become a Buddhist, although they find me less interesting, but they do find me become a nicer person. Mm-hmm. So it's strange. They my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, actually we have a better relationship. because I become softer, kinder, and so I can tell that they wanted to be with me. And sometimes I give them Dharma book to read. If they have some personal problem, they feel comfortable to talk to me. Not like before, I was so bossy and that kind of person, they stay away from me. But now I can see they like to associate with me, they like to be with me. So sometimes if they have a personal problem, they started to talk to me. And I handed them some piece of the, Buddhist wisdom, some good book. That's how I do it. And I find it's quite usable. And I don't lose friends. I kind of just convert them. We do things together. Yeah.
So I think the best idea is you share openly and honestly what you care about, without forcing it on them. But, you can still watch movies with people, but you may, in the process, help to select those that you think are more uplifting, You can get 10 questions for the Dalai Lama from Netflix and invite your friends over for movie night.
Yeah, true. Yes.
Yeah, just things like that. I think it's maybe more about being just genuine. And
it's kind of funny because among my friends, or coworkers, there's sort of this, there's a stigma. First of all, like for example, being a vegetarian, little things like that that people make into these huge. I'd rather just kind of be like, I can see what you're saying about sort of just being open and much more forthcoming with it, but there's a lot of sort of stigma that comes with having beliefs, I guess.
It's good to break their stigma.
Yeah.
You're helping them breaking their ignorance.
Yeah.
I used to feel that way too, and until we met these two other friends who also had the same interest in Buddhism, so we form our own little group and we'll sit weekly, have our own little gathering, and then we invite other people that we know. And one thing I noticed about one of them is that he was very open, telling everybody what he's doing. So when people ask what he's doing for the weekend, and he would say very openly, he said, well, I got a couple of hours, I had to do meditation with my friends. We get together to do meditation. And after I heard that, I just feel like I should do the same thing, because it's not like this is something that I'm ashamed of, I can hide. And after I felt that way, then I started to tell everybody else the same thing. It's actually, in the beginning it was a little bit uncomfortable, but after that it's kind of like, I don't want to say like coming out of the closet, I kind of feel like that in the beginning, but then after a while it started to feel more comfortable. So if I had to introduce, those friends, say, well, these are my Dharma friends, my meditation friends, or if they say, well, where are you going for vacation next week because you're taking off work? Then, well, I'm going to a meditation retreat. And the first reaction is like, a what? And then say, well, it's a meditation retreat. It's something to do to improve your mind and improve as a person. And some people kind of stay away from that, but then some people go, wow, that's interesting. Like, what is it? Then then you start talking about it. So it depends on who, but then after I made the decision to just go ahead and tell people, I feel more free. And if they don't like it, then that's fine, because I'm still nice to them as I always have been. I'm not changing my attitude toward them, but I think their attitude toward me is different, because all of a sudden you could see in their eyes that they kind of look at me in a different light. Like, oh, you've been doing all this time? Like, yeah. So it could be a positive thing.
I still haven't come out of the closet yet with my coworkers. Every time they ask me, where am I going? I'm going to go hang out with my friends. Which I am. It's not a lie. I'm going to do stuff together. I was like, yeah.
But I like to share. On the other hand, I feel like quite different from you, because I feel like Buddhism actually is insane. I mean, my group of friends, I think they feel that if you are Buddhist, hey, you're cool. I mean, study Buddhism. You must be very smart, intelligent.
Well, friends and
you
co-workers
you
are
have
quite
success.
different though.
Yeah.
Co-workers react very different.
Yeah, some of them are always thinking, man, you're gonna go to hell.
You're very.
The place where you live, like in Northern California, like Buddhism is really cool.
Yeah, well, in my area, I think Buddhism is really cool.
Yeah.
Even my older son, he's in Berkeley. He's now in university. He told me he's going to sign up a Buddhism class next semester.
Yeah, Berkeley is very liberal.
And the kids over there think Buddhism is cool.
Of course.
Orange
They
County
think
is
it's
slightly different.
Yeah, it's a Republican county.
My workplace is predominantly Caucasian. I'm one of the 3 Asian person in the whole workplace. And for them to for me to tell them that, I'm a vegetarian / pescatarian, it's like, well, what is that? Like,
Okay.
you only eating salad? Well, that's part of it.
I see.
Yeah, people judge you very, very quickly, and there's a lot of conflict at work. It is as it is, and I managed to pretty much be friends with everybody, and I kind of like that. I don't want to all of a sudden alienate.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And you don't want to, push anything on somebody. It's not like you're trying to get in their face about it, but at the same time, you can just, when you sense it's right that you can be a little more open about what you're doing, why not? If they've already known you for several years and worked with you, and they gradually find out about your quirky Buddhist side, probably won't be quite so disturbed by
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It's actually So go ahead.
I would like to say though that I don't know how long you've been involved with Buddhism, but to me it's been absolutely amazing the Sangha of the world. I can go to San Jose or Santa Cruz, and there's places that Land of Medicine Buddha. There's all these different places, Vajrapani, that you just connect with people, and there's this enormous brotherhood, sisterhood that exists now. It's blown me away.
If you're not careful, sometimes you can almost forget everybody is in Buddhism.
Yes, I agree with that too. Yes.
Yeah, it's ironic. I actually live next door to a Tibetan temple, and I haven't been in yet. But it's funny because there are sanghas nearby. My schedule's so chaotic that I haven't been able to go. But now it's going to be the time to make it happen. Get a new job.
Well, I hope this gives you a different perspective on what we talked about earlier.
Thanks.
Good. Thanks for asking that, Ray. Okay. Anything else? Well,
Jackie just
Yes.
raised his hand.
Just one question. Before after we lie on the bed, and is that okay to do this kind of a meditation?
oh yes, as a matter of fact, most meditators at some point start meditating before they go to sleep and as soon as they wake up.
But my worry is that if I'm doing this kind of practice, then you're going to increase my tendency to be sleepiness during the formal meditation. Is it?
Yeah.
Will it be the case?
Yes, I know a lot. That's the kind of concern that people often do have. But the way to do it, if you lay down in the bed and you're going to sleep, watch your breath, but sort of make your primary goal to watch your mind as it goes to sleep. Watch what going to sleep. Be mindfully aware of what going to sleep involves. And one thing that you can do too is just hold the thought that, you're going to see if you notice whether you fall asleep on an in-breath or on an out-breath. It doesn't seem to become a problem in terms of making it more likely that you're going to fall asleep when you meditate. But I think holding the intention that you're observing your mind go to sleep makes it a little bit different activity than when you're just doing sitting as a formal meditation practice. Enough so that somehow your mind keeps it straight that this is two different situations. But it's a very good practice to do. It's a very good practice to meditate going to sleep. And coupled with that, see if you can remember as soon as you wake up to begin to be aware of your in-breath and your out-breath.
I did that actually. I think because of retreat, I don't need so much sleep. So I think almost every night I wake up like at 4 o'clock. But it's not good to get out, to disturb other person. Just still stay in the bed. Do the same thing. And finally, it's easy to go back to sleep. Well, doing that. If in this case before, I think I just turn around till the bell rings, so I cannot get sleep again.
Well, if you
It do help to get into another sleep.
if you actually wake up and do meditation really early, I'll be happy to be disturbed by you.
Actually, that's one night. I just cannot sleep anymore, so I just sit on the bed and do meditation. So like maybe half an hour or 40 minutes. I feel sleepy again, so I couldn't go back to sleep. That's actually the one night. In a dream, I'm doing meditation.
Well, that was the other thing that I was going to mention to you, that after you do this for a while, you start to find you're meditating in your sleep too. And you're being mindful in your sleep.
Meditation in sleep is terrible.
It's actually quite nice.
So I just make sure it's okay to do that.
Yeah.
Does Buddhism, or do you have any insight into remembering dreams? Because I very, very rarely remember dreams.
I'm that way as well. I often, all I can remember is that I had a dream, and what I can remember, if I remember anything at all, is just such tiny little snatches, But sometimes, as a result of meditating, especially this kind of meditation, you'll have very vivid dreams that you remember. At least that's what happens with me. And sometimes you will, because of the mindfulness practice, you'll start to have lucid dreams. You'll know that you're dreaming. You're dreaming, and you know that you're dreaming, and you'll have thoughts related to that. You might manipulate things. I find when I have that kind of lucid dream, often what I end up doing, if I don't like the way the dream's going, I redirect it, or sometimes I rewind it and redo that last part. But it's also very illuminating. It's very illuminating to be in that experience of being aware while you're asleep and while you're dreaming. Yeah?
I have a question about death. Like when you're dying, how do you make sure you go to a good place?
You lead a good life. You lead a good, wholesome life.
Good investment.
Yeah.
Do the right things.
Do the right thing. Spend your days doing whatever you can to be helpful to others, and keep your virtue, practice the Dharma. You see, they say that when you die, and the moment before you die, you will become aware of those things that you did in your life that are karmically particularly strong, and they make an imprint on your mind, which carries over and determines your subsequent rebirth. So, first of all, make sure there's lots of positive things for your mind to go to. And then secondly, be such a good practitioner that you can be mindful during your death, and you can deliberately call to mind the good, the good and virtuous aspects of your life. Beyond that, you can also attain enlightenment at the time of death. Because as the body dies and as the brain begins to cease to function and as the mind breaks up, there will be a moment that is the same thing happens as what happens at path attainment. And if you've prepared your mind suitably when that occurs, then rather than being reborn, you can attain enlightenment in that moment. So that's the other thing. That's why it's good to practice meditation, so that at the time of death you can enter into a state of clear, focused awareness and guard your mind against negative thoughts and fear and things like that. Okay?
Did you have to achieve any stage before, when you said that you can get enlightened after for that moment? Is there any prerequisite?
If you can achieve samatha, where you have very strong mindful awareness and the mind is very still, and just observe the process of dying as it takes place.
So you don't.
So become skilled in samatha.
And you don't have to be a stream winner or any of these before.
No, this is a guaranteed opportunity.
Well, you can hop stages. You can go from 0 to the fourth stage.
Well,
The fourth fruit.
I don't know, but it's always possible. I mean, the Buddha became fully enlightened all at one time. I mean, it doesn't say in the sutras whether it was, the stages were half an hour apart or 5 minutes apart, or they all happened all at once. But go for it. And if you only get first or second stage, it's still you'll be reborn as a stream winner or as a once returner. And this will be your return.
Wow, that's very positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also pretty risky.
Pretty risky.
Yeah, see, this
You
is
got nothing to lose.
well, waiting for them will be very risky.
Yeah, don't wait.
Don't wait.
I don't understand why you say that. Why is the risk there?
Don't wait till the moment that you die to try to achieve enlightenment.
Oh, that's not possible. You don't have the habit to be still.
No, that's right. You won't. But what it means is it's never too late. Right up to the very last moment, it's never too late. Yeah.
Sorry. So when you're talking about the moment of death, so that even includes the last moment of your life includes a lot of pain and suffering, because say assuming that you live to old age and body started to function started to fail. So we will try to remain equanimous despite the pain. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, there's a very good chance that death is going to be painful. So the stronger your samatha, the better you'll be able to maintain it, and in spite of the things that occur with your body in the process of dying.
What happens to sudden death? Like, what if, a person just gets run over by a
Bus.
So,
there's no time to
I first of all, I haven't had any personal experience that I can.
We probably have 3 years lifetimes.
And secondly, I haven't really encountered anywhere where somebody explicitly addresses that question. But the moments that they're talking about are so brief that if you had really good skill in entering samatha, perhaps you could have the moment when you realize that you're dying, and still have a moment to generate the clarity of mind. So, I mean, just take that as a goal, right?
One reason to be more motivated.
That's
right.
So that really makes sense that you teach us to be mindful all the time.
Mm-hmm. Be mindful all the time. Yeah, that's the. For so many different reasons, that's the wisest thing to do. Okay.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me one question. What is the right attitude for the Buddhist about the life sustain system and
about life what?
Life sustain. You
know,
it's like a machine.
Sustaining life with machine.
Yeah, right. You know, it's not attachment. I mean, it doesn't go, but or the organ transplant and.
You mean donation, right?
The transplant. Maybe you won't donate to somebody else. Maybe somebody will give to you. What are those kinds of things? You know, should we donate our organ after death? As
a Buddhist, yes, you should donate your organs after death. It's a wonderfully beneficial thing to do for somebody else. And there's absolutely no reason not to.
And I heard some I don't know if that's just a ritual or something, like after, you know, some with Buddhists believe after people die in 24 hours you cannot move the body or something.
Consciousness is supposed to be still there or something?
Yeah.
I hear that a lot.
But if you want to do the donation, after 12 hours, the organ is useless, you know. After 1 hour, some.
Well, there are in certain traditions, like in the Tibetan tradition, they leave the body for several days. But this is not. This is only within certain traditions. This isn't universal. This isn't something the Buddha said. So, I suppose what I should say to you is that it's your choice. If you regard to hold a belief that not touching the body after death is important, then that's totally your right, and I wouldn't want to make you feel as though that were not a good decision. But there really is nothing in what you might call the original Buddhism or the basic Buddhism, core Buddhism, to make you feel that there is any reason why, once your body is dead, that your organs shouldn't be preserved to help someone else. Related to that, and connected to that, is the question of whether you want your body to be kept alive on life support. And on the one hand, because the human life is so precious and has an opportunity to become enlightened, then you should conscientiously preserve the life of your body for as long as you might have the chance to achieve your enlightenment. But under the circumstances that you're not conscious in a bed with tubes and things like that, that's not going to serve that purpose. And so there's no reason to cling to life in that way.
What about occasionally people come out of these comas after like 20 years or something like that, but that's extremely rare. and of course, in the meantime, it's consuming so much resources. People are naturally saddened because there's no closure for this ongoing thing that they worry about.
Yes, that's pretty rare, and I personally wouldn't sign something saying keep me alive under any circumstances, just in case I might come out of a coma in 20 years.
So you basically just want whoever is deciding to exercise its judgment.
Or I think, it's anybody's own choice, but I haven't done this, I probably should do this, but is to sign one of those forms that says, that if I'm on life support and the medical opinion is that I'm never going to come off of it, then, pull the plug.
How about if, we already sign up those kind of paper? I wanted to say is just go get rebirth, and after 20 years I become young man or young girl, I study practice Dharma again.
I think we're very lucky to be born in a time that there's hardly any wars, because in history, there's famine, there's war. We're assuming that we're going to born in a very comfortable place once again.
Yeah, but teacher already told us if we practice Dharma all life long, we should go to a better place.
Because in the past, I've seen very accomplished, Buddhists. They get beaten to death by the by the communists. Yeah, I think these people they're probably more accomplished than most of us here.
And we never know. The world could change in a moment.
Right.
So. But the only reason for clinging to life is to fulfill the goal of achieving your liberation for the sake of helping all sentient beings to come to enlightenment. And so at any point when clinging to life is not reasonably likely to achieve that goal, then it just becomes grasping. We're all going to die. We're already dying. We're all sitting here dying together.
Happily dying together. I'm eager to hear you talk about. You say to break out of dependent co-arising is the path to liberation. I'm anxious to hear about it.
I think that's a great idea. Everyone ready to talk about that? Okay. So everybody's completely familiar with dependent origination. I don't have to explain any of it? No, I don't think so. I better explain it. Okay. This is a very important teaching because it explains how we keep creating ourselves and our world over and over again, and how we remain trapped in samsara. So it's a series of events that occur one after another that are repeated over and over again. So that's that sequence of events, or maybe events isn't the right word. It's really a sequence of causality. Now, usually it's presented as 12 links of dependent origination. But those 12 can be divided into 3 parts. And the first 2 are giving you a brief summary of what has happened in the past. And the last 2 are giving you are putting it all together as to what's going to happen in the future, or how this process leads to continued rebirth. So the most important out of the 12 are the 8 in between, because they're describing the sequence of events that happens over and over again, and that we must break in order to achieve awakening. The first link is consciousness, vijnana. And wherever there is consciousness, there is the second link, namarupa, or form and name and form. Now the connection between these first two is different than all the rest. All the rest go in this one. When this one is present, it is a cause of that one and leads to it taking place. And then that one leads to the next one. But this first two, they're reciprocal. Wherever there is consciousness, there is namarupa. And wherever there is namarupa, there is consciousness. So they never occur independently of each other, but they always occur. Each is the cause of each other. Or as the Buddha said when he described this, that this consciousness turns back on itself, and this namarupa and this consciousness cause each other. What does this mean? The Buddha said that what an individual is namarupa. Name and form. And that this name and form consists of 5 things, and we talked about those last night. The 5 aggregates, or 5 heaps, or 5 skandhas, or 5 khandhas. These are what you will know them as. Form, first. Let's look at that. Sometimes form means materiality, the physical universe. But when we're putting nama and rupa together and saying, an individual is namarupa, and namarupa is the individual, and the Buddha is also saying that there is nothing else to you than this. You are namarupa. You are these 5 aggregates, and there is no self or soul besides. Okay? So anyway, when we're talking about namarupa as being what constitutes the individual, then rupa does not mean the physical universe. Sometimes it's interpreted that it means the body. But if you think about it reasonably, how do you know that the body is really, compared to the other 4, which are called nama, which are mental? Rupa, the body, is part of materiality. It's part of the physical universe. And how do you experience the body, and how do you know the body exists? Through sensation. I can see my hand, I can feel my hand. So it's through the senses that are a part of the body that I know of the existence of the body. So when we say nama rupa is the individual, what we should take that to mean is sensation. Those sensations that are produced by the 5 senses. And so now we can understand that whenever there is consciousness, there is an object of consciousness. And the object of consciousness can be sensation, rupa, or it can be one of these other 4 that we call nama. That can be a mental object. Let's look at the other 4. Nama consists of feelings, of pleasant and unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. That's a mental object, right? Feelings are known to the mind, and they are of the mind, and they're part of the mind. So pleasantness, unpleasantness is something that belongs to the mind. It's part of Dhamma. Perception. The perception is part of the mind. And that which you perceive is a mental object. Mental formations, and we talked about that. Mental formations include all thoughts, ideas, concepts, emotional states, memories, intentions, karmic intentions, volitions. Those are all the mental formations. Any of these can be an object of consciousness. We know our sensations, we know thoughts, we know concepts. But also the mental formations, as we talked about last night, are what determines the nature of the perception that occurs. When consciousness takes a sensation as object, then a process of recognition takes place, and then consciousness takes the concept associated with that as the object. The fourth thing is consciousness itself. So really, when we look at these first two links of dependent origination, we'll see here's another reason why they're inseparable, because consciousness is part of Nama-Rupa. But the reason that I think that the way the Buddha said it is with consciousness as cause there is name and form, Nama-Rupa. And with name and form as cause there is consciousness. What he's saying is that we're about to describe something that takes place involving a human individual. And these are what's present. Consciousness and the objects of consciousness, which are of these two types, rupa or sensation, or all of the various mental objects. So that's the first link, is the first causal link, but it's a two-way link. And now, the next step in dependent origination says that where there is Nama-Rupa, where there is an individual, there will be the sense bases, the 6 sense bases, the sense organs, and the objects. And the next step says where there are sense organs and sense objects, there will occur contact between an object and a sense organ, and there will arise, as a result of this, consciousness. So this is contact. There is consciousness of the object with the sense organ functioning as the door. And then he says, where there is contact, there will arise feeling of pleasure or pain, pleasant or unpleasant, or neither. Wherever there is, the next link is wherever there is the experience of pleasure or pain, or neither pleasant or unpleasant, there will arise craving. That's really important causal link right there. Then he says, wherever there is craving, as with craving as a cause, there will be, this word is often translated as clinging or grasping. The word is upadana. And so we'll take it as meaning, translated as grasping. Wherever there is craving, there is grasping. But what grasping means making real the idea of self and the idea of the object that you perceive as responsible for the pleasure or pain. So this is a very important thing that's happening. Upadana, this is the process by which you create a self capable of suffering, and you create a world that is separate from the self. You basically take reality, you divide it into these two, self and the world, mind is now taking them as real. And then with upadana, with grasping as a cause, there is becoming. So we become what our mind has generated. And we come into this reality. And as a result of that, part of becoming this is where our karmic actions arise. So when we become, then we become a self with something we want, and we commit an action to obtain what we want. Or a self with something that we despise, and we perform an action to eliminate or separate ourselves from that which we despise. That's what becoming is. So then, in this sequence, what the Buddha is saying over and over again, what happens? Here you are, you exist. There's consciousness in name and form, and so then there is, because there are sense organs, and that which contacts the sense organs, there will be contact, there will be feeling, there will be craving. The mind will grasp and make real, and then there will be becoming. Now what we experience is the chain of becoming. We're mostly unaware of any of these other steps, right? But if you think what does your life consist of? It's all of these events, which in every case there is a self and something that you have either desire or aversion for, and then some action that arises to express that desire or aversion. It might be a physical action, it might be a verbal action, or it might just be a thought. But it's an action. It's a volitional action that comes out of it. And this is your history. You look back, and a moment ago and 10 minutes ago, it's this chain of becoming, which is the last of these links. But now we can see what's happening here. Each of these becomings is a separate event. And each of those becomings is the result of a causal chain, the links of dependent origination. So we can see that this chain of becoming is filled with suffering, because it arises out of desire and aversion. We look at the links and say, where can it be interrupted? And where it can be interrupted is at the link of craving. If you can eliminate the link of craving, then you will eliminate the grasping. And if you eliminate the grasping, you eliminate the becoming. So, this is how you do it. Right? So then what we want to accomplish is to break the links, interrupt the links of dependent origination at the link of craving. Now this is not different than what we said before when we discussed the Four Truths. We see that the cause of suffering in our life is due to craving, and that if we can bring about the cessation of craving, that we will bring about the cessation of suffering. But there is a lot of deeper philosophy embedded in this dependent origination, because it's also recognizing that what we do in every act of grasping is creating an illusion of a self and creating an illusion of an object or objects to which our craving is directed, and that it is the mind's grasping to these two that brings us into being. So what is happening here? You have a sensory, you have an experience. I shouldn't say sensory experience, because remember, in the link of the sense bases and contact, it involves all six senses, so it can be a mental object, not just a sensation. And as a matter of fact, we can see that very often it's a sensation that triggered the mental object to come into being. You have a pleasant sensation, and so you have a concept related to that, desirable sex partner or whatever it is. some concept comes up. So what happens is there's a sensation. Now, I said I wasn't going to use the word sensation so that we're clear we're talking about mental objects as well. There is a phenomena of contact with one of the 6 kinds of sense objects. And so there is the feeling of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And as a result of that, there arises craving. Now, just in terms of this craving, what is craving? Craving is craving related to the senses, so it's craving for pleasure or pain. But it's also craving for existence or non-existence. So even where the feeling that arises is neither pleasant nor painful, there can still be a craving that arises, such as a craving for something that is pleasant instead of something that's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. A craving for that matter, there can be just simply the craving to come into being. Now, what this is describing is actually something that's happening over and over again very, very quickly. Because, it's like in a movie is made up of separate pictures, but it seems like a continuous action. Our life appears continuous, the same way the movie on the screen does. But in a sense, our life, instead of being continuous, is made up of a series of events taking place very rapidly, one after another, where contact with the sense object is triggering feeling, craving, grasping, and becoming. And that's creating the movie of our life. The problem with the movie of our life is that the self that the movie of our life, the self in the image that the movie of our life generates, is empty of any real existence, and is the root, and is the belief in that self is the root of the ongoing craving and suffering that we experience, and that these objects that we grasp and that we act in order to obtain, these objects are empty of any self-existent reality, because reality is a constant flux, a non-stop change. There is no permanence, and the thing that we imagine to be there, that we grasp, doesn't exist and cannot exist. It's only something that the mind projects on an ultimate reality that is nothing but constant change. Also, it has no nature of thingness and separateness, because the reality upon which we project this appearance of it being a separate thing that can be obtained or destroyed or whatever is an illusion. The reality itself is totally interdependent. Everything is interconnected. Nothing is separate. So, the illusion that samsara is an illusion that's created by the mind, taking a seamless, ultimate reality and splitting it into a self and objects of desire or aversion, and just generating this whole process over and over again. Now, what do we do about this? How do we become awake? How do we become enlightened? Okay, this is a great idea. Buddha gives us this theory of this is how things are. But we need some way, first of all, to discover that this theory is in fact true. That's really what's happening. And then we also need to be able to do something about it if we want to become enlightened. So that's what all of the practice is about. How do you interrupt this process long enough to have the direct experience of nirvana? Nirvana means the cessation of craving. So if you have the direct experience of the cessation of craving, that means that you're having when you experience nirvana, you're experiencing what happens when the link of craving is severed. Or you have the direct experience of emptiness. Well, what does it mean to have the direct experience of emptiness? It means to stop the process of the mind chopping ultimate reality up into separate things with an imaginary permanence that consists of a self and objects of desire and aversion, and to see ultimate reality as it really is, which is empty. So direct experience of emptiness means the direct experience of the true nature of reality, which is empty of all of these constructs. It's empty of all of these projections. To see emptiness is to see it the way it is, empty of these projections. Right? So, and if we can experience nirvana, if we can have a direct experience of emptiness, if we can see the true nature of reality, then we've achieved the first stage of enlightenment. Our minds will go back to running the cycle of dependent origination again. But now we know. We've stopped it and we've seen, right? So that's the beginning. That's stream entry. Right? So now let's talk about what's actually involved in the stopping. At least, as we said, enlightenment can happen in many ways, and even totally unexpectedly. Some people become enlightened while waiting for a bus. Very, very rare. Most people...
You actually know a case of people waiting for the bus and they're enlightened? I'm sorry, please ignore me. We have better use of your time. But
I'll tell you, in fact, I have read a reasonably convincing account of a woman for whom that happened. She had no previous spiritual practice. She had an experience of the cessation of the creation of the world. She didn't know what to make of it, and her life was very difficult for some time afterwards, because that's the disadvantage of it happening spontaneously. You don't know what happened. All right. There are accounts of it happening as a result of people who experience extreme suffering for long periods of time. It can happen as a part of people being engaged in really extreme devotional experiences, and there are accounts of those. But what I'm most familiar with, and I think what most commonly happens when somebody becomes enlightened, it's the result of a period of very deliberate and very systematic spiritual training in a spiritual path that's intended to lead to that. One such, which is this Buddhist path that we're practicing. And as far as I have been able to discern, although other paths, other traditions other than the Buddhist traditions do offer spiritual paths that will lead to this goal, that this is by far the most systematic, the most understandable, the most applicable, the most reproducible over and over again in many people. So it's very reliable. So that's the one that I know, and that's the one that I'm going to describe to you. If we follow the path that the Buddha taught, that leads to the cessation of craving, the experience of nirvana, the direct experience of emptiness, the knowledge and understanding of the true nature of reality, and therefore the attainment of the first path of liberation. This is how we try to bring it about. Of the facts about the illusion that we are trapped in, the one that is easiest to grasp is impermanence. It's easiest to see beyond the illusion of permanence. And so that can be the easiest gateway. But by itself, it is not sufficient. Other things that characterize reality and that are misconstrued by the illusion that we are in addition to the appearance of, I won't say permanence, because we don't really see everything as permanent, but we see everything as being at least temporarily enduring and separate. We also experience things as, yes, having a separate nature of their own. Most particularly, we experience ourselves and ourself. Myself is a separate reality. And seems to me, it feels to me to be real. So the second characteristic of reality that is obscured by illusion is that there is no self. There is no separate self. No self. But in the illusion, the self seems real. Related to that, part of that is the emptiness of the world. It also seems that this self exists within a world of other things that are separate from and independent of this self. And each of those is a separate entity in its own right. Through understanding impermanence, we can begin to break down the mind's attachment to this way of seeing things. And through recognizing that all we really go by is sensation, and yet the mind projects concepts onto those sensations to make sense of it and to create a world and explain why we have the sensations that we do, and to help us to predict what kind of sensations we're going to have in a few minutes if we do this or if we do that. We can see that that is just a projection of mind. We can understand that. We can get a grasp on emptiness. So the easiest thing for us to do is to see that the reality is impermanence, and anything other than impermanence is an illusion. And that the reality is that there is no thingness to what we experience with separate natures, but that is only a projection of our minds, and therefore the world is empty. And then not only that, but we can come to understand, as we talked about the other day, that the self is empty of any self-existent reality as well, but the self is also a projection of the mind. And then the other thing is that this illusion that we live in will never be satisfying and fulfilling, and it will always produce pain and suffering. But the illusion tells us, if only I can have this and that and that, and if only I can prevent this and that and the other thing from happening, I will then be happy. And if only I can hold on to these and continue to keep these away, I'll continue to be happy. That's the illusion, right? So the illusion is that there is some sort of enduring quality to things that have a reality in their own side, and that I am an existent being that can enjoy those things and can obtain them and manipulate this external reality, and that if I try hard enough, long enough, I'll succeed in manipulating this reality and I'll become happy as a result. That's the whole illusion right there. So the Buddha said, come to understand the characteristics of impermanence, selflessness, and dissatisfactoriness as fully as you can. And this is what we do in all of our practices: our sitting practice, our walking practice, any kind of vipassana practice. Vipassana means special insight. And the special insight that we're after is the insight into impermanence and the insight into non-self and the insight into ultimate dissatisfactoriness. These are the core insights. There's many other insights that are related to this, but they're all related to this. These are the core insights that we're after. Okay? Now, all of our practice is, as much as possible, a form of vipassana trying to lead to those insights. The condition that most reliably and consistently will lead to the cessation of craving and path attainment is when you have these three insights firmly established in your mind. At the same time, your mind is still and completely still and observing the arising and passing away of phenomena. And your mind also is in a state of profound equilibrium. In other words, not equilibrium, profound equanimity. In other words, craving is as weak as you can make it already. So that there's as little grasping as possible already taking place. This is a mental state, a meditation state, that is called samatha. And another name for it is the knowledge of equanimity towards formations. In samatha, you have profound equanimity, and you have profound concentration, and you have profound mindfulness. So you observe a phenomena unfolding, rising and passing away, rising and passing away. You observe them unfolding. Now, if while you have samatha, you also have this very clear understanding of the three insights, then what will happen is in some moment, now look back, let's go back to the steps of dependent origination. In some moment, one of the 6 kinds of objects will contact one of the 6 sense organs, and there will arise a feeling of pleasant, unpleasant, or neither. And at that moment, the insights, the 3 insights, will be so strong, and the equanimity will be so strong, that the mind reacts in a different way. At this point, the mind, it doesn't even see that object as an object in the way that it normally would. It sees that object as impermanence. It sees impermanence directly. And it sees selflessness, emptiness, and selflessness in the object. And it sees dissatisfactoriness in the object. And so now, what the mind does is turn away from it. And in so doing, it interrupts the process. At that point, there's cessation of craving, and grasping does not occur. And there is experience of the true nature of reality. And this is the path moment, the attainment of the path.
Attainment of the path. Can I explain that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Attainment. The 4 stages of enlightenment are called the 4 paths.
Oh.
So the path moment. This is the moment of attainment of the first stage of enlightenment, and it happens pretty much the same way over and over again in the future. Now, when you have this experience, what it does do. First of all, any doubts you had about the Buddhist path are gone. So there's elimination of doubt. Right? Once you've been there, done that, you don't wonder. There's no wondering about maybe anymore. That's out of the picture. Secondly, you've had an experience, a direct experience that there is no self and there is no world, and so afterwards you are just not going to believe in this idea of self, this concept of self, or even this feeling of self anymore. Because you know better. So you have permanently overcome your attachment and belief in the reality of self. Likewise, you've understood the emptiness of the world. So that's the second thing, is that you have overcome the attachment to the belief in the self. The third thing that happens, of course, you've seen the emptiness of the games the mind plays. And you realize that you no longer believe in rites and rituals and magic, things like that. And up until that point, to some degree, you still believed in magic. To some degree, you still thought enlightenment was even some sort of, if you did all the right things in the right order, then magic would happen. Well, it is a kind of magic, but it doesn't come from any external source or power. Like magic is magic. It comes from some supernatural source, but you don't believe in that anymore. So these are the three defilements that have been obliterated at stream entry. Now, it's very important. This happens. You don't really know what's happened, and your mind goes back to, all of a sudden you find yourself, here's the self again, here's the world again, but you really know something different. And what is very important is that you've arrived at this through a path of practice, and you can repeat it. And every time you go back and you experience nirvana again, that's called fruition consciousness. And you do that. An important part of the way that you're going to achieve the second path, that you're going to achieve the second stage of enlightenment, is that you're going to keep revisiting nirvana. And you're going to learn to revisit nirvana for longer and longer periods of time, until the understanding that it brings has penetrated to the absolute depths of your mind. Now let's talk about the mind here. What happens with nirvana is the mind stops. It stops doing its thing. Right? But then it has to start doing again, because we're consciousness and namarupa. That's what we are, and that's what the mind does. So it starts doing its thing again. And the mind it's still conditioned. Your mind is still filled with all of the habits that it had before. All the old ways of looking at things, they haven't gone away. Certain things have changed in your mind, though. You can think of your mind, in modern terms. I don't know how the Buddha thought of it, but in modern terms, we can think of the mind as this fantastic computer, and it's filled with all this information, and it's always taking in new data, and it runs programs, and then it produces results that are the results of the programs that it runs. And that's determined by the data that it has. It has some really new data now. There's one of the programs that the mind has always run, has been creating the self. And when you come back, well, the mind's still going to create the self. It's got to do that. Otherwise you've got no way to keep your laundry separate from anybody else's. Right? You've got to have a sense of self. You just, like Jill Bolte Taylor, when she had a stroke and the part of her brain that's responsible for that mechanism of making a self wasn't working, she couldn't function in the world. She had to have somebody else take care of all of those things, because...
She wearing her husband's underwear. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it.
She wasn't married, and it was her mother was taking care of her, but yeah, she'd walk out in the street in her own underwear, and it seemed like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. So she,
I'm sorry.
So
that was a bad
that's all right. That's good. So anyway, you see, so to live in the world, our mind has to generate this construct of self, but we no longer have to believe in it. That's one way that the mind has changed. It's now can be understood more clearly as something functional that the mind does, and now of course you can work on refining that. You've got a lot of egocentric habits that are still there, associated with from a few minutes ago when you still believed in the sense of self, and now you're going to have to spend a long time uprooting those old habits and changing them. Whereas in the past, that task of uprooting those egocentric habits might have been really a challenge, taking a lot of time, taking a lot of effort, lots of practice of mindfulness over and over again to uproot each habit one at a time. Now it's a lot easier. So that's one of the things that's changed. Another thing that has changed is so much of our experience of suffering is dependent upon this concept of self. Likewise, so much of our unwholesome behavior is a result of our craving, which is in turn related to the self that we cherish and that we're trying to provide with pleasure and protect from pain. So one of the ways that's changed is that your mind has new data to operate on. So you find yourself in certain situations, and because of its new information, the program of the mind's a little bit different, and it doesn't produce the same kind of suffering it did before. It still produces suffering. As a stream entrant, you're not completely free from suffering, because you're not completely free from craving, you're not completely free from desire and aversion. But it's nothing like before. After all, where does suffering come from?
Craving.
When you feel miserable, it comes from craving, but also in another sense, you look at it this way. Okay, when I feel miserable, where does that feeling of miserableness come from? Well, my mind creates it. Your mind creates your suffering. It's a mental state. It's an emotion. Your mind says, your mind looks at the data, runs a program, answer, produce suffering. So, okay. And then you're miserable. Why do I feel so bad? This is terrible.
Bad programming, bad.
But it's because you feel so bad because your mind added everything up and it says, hey, we're supposed to feel bad. So it makes suffering. And miserable. But now something's different. And so it doesn't produce suffering in quite the same way. And even if you're a very complex computer, so sometimes it takes a little while to get all the settings, reset to the new data. But the thing is that when you find yourself in a lot of suffering, you can say, wait a minute, I don't need to do this anymore. And so that's what's so good about being a stream entrant. Same thing, all of our habits and the craving that we still have can cause us to start behaving in ways that are not wholesome. I mean, there is this myth, you might come across the stream entrants have perfect virtue and they never can commit any unvirtuous action. It's not true. Nice idea. Maybe if the stream entrant lives in a monastery, has been perfecting his virtue for a long time, might be true. But in general, the stream entrant, he's still got all of these habits of behavior, still has some desire and craving and aversion. So, still going to have, if his mindfulness lapses, can slip into some behaviors of a kind that are unvirtuous. But the thing is, he'll realize it, especially if he starts to see that it's causing suffering in somebody else. And it's the same thing. It's, wait a minute, there's no reason for this to be happening anymore. There's no reason for me to be attached to this particular idea that makes me behave in this way. And it's relief from it. So this is This is the benefit of becoming a stream entrant. But this is how you get there. And this is why the meditation is important. It's why every form of vipassana that you can practice is important. Anything that you do that helps you to become more continuously aware of impermanence, the illusionary nature of the self, and the ultimate dissatisfactoriness of life as it is vipassana. Vipassana is not labeling the rise and fall. Vipassana is not scanning the body. Vipassana is not any particular practice. Vipassana is absolutely everything that you can, everything and anything that you can ever possibly do to make it clear as possible these three characteristics, and to make you aware of them all the time. You can have profound meditative experiences in which you have the direct experience of impermanence. You experience sensation just continuously rising and passing away, no substance in it, and you realize that my mind is just projecting these things on this continuous flow. That's a direct experience of impermanence. And it makes it, and it's really, really clear to you. But what is going to take some effort is to establish that so you're aware of that all the time. You don't forget it. You have this wonderful experience of impermanence, and then you get off and then you've forgotten all about it. You have to keep reminding yourself. Well, you do. You have to keep reminding yourself. You have to keep going back and seeing impermanence again. You have to remind yourself. You have to re-experience it. You have to, in all kinds of circumstances, you have to say, you have to remind yourself, this is impermanence, and try to see the impermanence that's there. The same thing with selflessness. You have to keep reminding yourself that, especially at those times when the sense of self is really strong. I want things to be this way, and I'm a controlling person, so I'm going to make, Those are your prime opportunities. That's you go and say, oh, there's not really a self here, is there? But look at this. My mind makes it seem just as if it is. Keep reminding yourself. And try, it's not just trying to convince yourself of it by saying it over and over again. You're trying to see the reality of it so that it becomes a part of the way that, it becomes a part of your view. Because see, in that state of samatha that is going to result in path attainment, all three of these insights have to be really strong and really balanced. Any one of the three is weak. Doesn't matter how aware you are of the impermanence, if the understanding of not self is weak, then you're not going to have the breakthrough.
You're talking about the fourth fruit right now.
What's that?
Which fruit are you talking about?
I'm talking about the first one.
Oh, the first one.
I'm talking about any of them. I'm talking about the first one. That in order to... now I was talking about before first path, you have to keep reinforcing your understanding of these three of these three characteristics. Because you're looking forward to the day or the moment or the hour when that pays off.
I see.
In path attainment and craving stop, the mind stopping doing what it's doing. And you have to work on all three of them. Now what I'm pointing out to you here is you come to that moment, you're in samatha, you've got profound equanimity, and you have really clear understanding of impermanence and dissatisfactoriness, but you haven't really got the same depth of understanding of, or the same degree of insight into not self. The mind's going to keep the process going because there's still all of that clinging and craving associated with the idea of self. Or it could be, you could have now, and especially if the idea of not self is weak and the idea of dissatisfactoriness and impermanence is strong, you can have a very uncomfortable experience. Because having still feeling like you're a self, but you're now a self that lives in a world that is where there's nothing to stand on, nothing to hold to, nothing to rely on, and no matter what you do, it's doomed to bring you unhappiness in the end. That's not a nice place to be. But anyway, that's a little bit of a digression. If any of the three are weak, you're not going to have the breakthrough. If not self is clear, and if you have profound insight into impermanence, but you're still not quite convinced that happiness isn't obtainable somehow, you're not going to have the breakthrough. So you need the Vipassana practice, whatever form it takes, and that's all you need to know. How do I practice Vipassana? What I need to know, how you practice Vipassana is if you know what you're trying to do. You're trying to clearly and firmly establish insights into impermanence, selflessness, and unsatisfactoriness in your mind. That's practicing Vipassana. And you can do it all the time. And do it all the time. The factors of enlightenment, of effort and investigation are what's involved here. Now, the other factors of enlightenment come from meditation specifically, which are concentration, mindful awareness, joy, equanimity, tranquility. So these other five, this is why you asked last night, Michael, so why are we sitting here and watching the sensations at the tip of our nose if what we really need to be doing is developing insight? And that's the reason. You do need these other five factors of enlightenment. And as a matter of fact, you're not going to really be able to practice the Vipassana nearly as effectively, and maybe not effectively enough at all, unless you have the meditation to bring you these particular mental skills.
We don't need meditation to have joy and tranquility. It seems like just by being virtuous, that's a natural product of it, right?
Being virtuous will help to bring joy, yes. But there is the joy that spontaneously arises with the unification of the mind, which is the enlightenment factor that you want to cultivate in meditation. Right?
I see.
That's part of this path. Remember, the formula I'm giving you isn't necessarily absolutely the only way to achieve enlightenment. But in terms of the path that the Buddha taught, and the 7 factors of enlightenment that the Buddha found and taught to be essential to this path. It is that particular joy, but every kind of joy, joy is joy. And if you want to have meditative joy, it's good to have a joyful state of mind in the rest of your life. It's going to make meditative joy occur much more easily. And it is beyond question that living in a virtuous way and practicing loving kindness, compassion, and generosity are going to contribute enormously to your joy. Now, the little bug over there is going to become enlightened now, listening to it. They say the animals and insects that listen to Dharma talks, they get reborn as monks in their next lifetime when they get to.
It's a good energy you're giving it.
Anyway.
Oh, wow, there's mice around here.
All those mice, yeah.
Lucky mice. They hit the jackpot.
Those mice have good karma to decide to live in a house, in a retreat house, right?
We shouldn't drive them away. We should invite them.
Go to Michael's room.
No, go to Culadasa where environment doesn't matter.
Michael's so diligent.
So you can always just, recite a little Dharma when the mouse comes out from under.
Culadasa said there are a bunch of mice in your room. They probably heard about the good news. They're all congregating.
That's funny thing about those mice, because you wonderful, generous people keep bringing our meals to us in our room so that I can eat in peace and solitude. And so sometimes we didn't always, there were pieces of paper in the trash bag that had food on it and little bits of food here and there. And the mice were having a party every night. In the middle of the night, you hear a mouse running around in a paper bag, licking the crumbs off of a piece of paper. It makes a lot of noise. So anyway, a few nights ago we thought, okay, we're not going to leave a single crumb anywhere here for these mice, and took out all the dirty paper and everything else like that. Well, the next morning there were acorns on the table. The mice came and they said, well, these poor people, they've run out of food.
Boy, that's a big treasure for them.
That is, yeah.
See, they're practicing generosity.
They are. You have to really think differently about these mice,
Then we didn't eat it, so then they took it back.
That's right. Yeah, we saved the acorns and we were showing them, look what the acorns that the mice brought us. And then we left them on the dresser, and then the next night they disappeared.
Well, you don't want that, I'll take it back.
It's similar like if you put a fruit or water in front of a Buddha, the next day the Buddha didn't drink it and eat it. So people take it away. Like that.
Yeah.
It's a thought I count they offered.
It's the same thing.
I'm sorry.
I'm not.
I get carried away.
Sophia?
Yeah, the first part of Dharma talk you gave us last night is very important for tonight.
Yes. That's true. So, thank you.
Yeah, every part is important. Every part makes this part great.
Any questions?
Okay. Open floodgate.
I want to clarify. You mentioned about empty is mean the empty of the projection. That's emptiness.
That's emptiness. Yeah. People sometimes have trouble understanding what emptiness means, and they think it's like nothingness or void. But emptiness means specifically empty of any nature of being the way it appears to be, because the way it appears to be is a projection of our mind. So.
You mean we better to know impermanent, emptiness, no self, and unsatisfied.
Yes, that's the key things that cultivate the understanding of. Yeah.
For an average practitioner, which stage of meditation does he observe break the link, or observe this temporarily stopping craving?
Of the 10 stages, the 10th stage describes the state that you want to come to, which and it doesn't mean, the description of the 10 stages is describing how you become a yogi who can enter samatha every time or almost every time you sit down, or any time you sit down. That's not necessary. It could happen to somebody who previously has never gotten past the 3rd stage, and yet they're on a retreat, they have a really good sit, and they find themselves in a meditation that corresponds to the 10th stage. As a matter of fact, in terms of those 10 stages, you can find yourself in any one of those stages at any time. So a rank beginner can find themselves in an 8th or 9th or 10th stage meditation practice. In terms of developing their practice, though, they will probably have to go back to being a beginner and work themselves their way all the way through 2, 3, 4, 5, in order to consistently be there. There's a difference between what can happen just as once out of the blue, or something that can happen rarely, but you don't know how to cause it to happen, and having trained your mind so that you can consistently do something. But yes, the stage that we're talking about where this is going to happen is